In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to use Revolve to create a wine glass. So there's a couple of things that we need to discuss first. The first of these is polygons versus another method of creating geometry in 3D, which are Nurbs. So I'm going to start by creating a Polygon Sphere, which you should be familiar with. Polygon spheres, polygon anything, consists of edges, faces, and vertices. And we've been using those throughout the year. If I come here to curved surfaces, you'll see another set of shapes as well. These are blue. And if I click on this one, this is an example of a Nurbs sphere. Nurbs stands for non-uniform rational B-splines, which is something that you don't need to be aware of. Just know that they are really good at creating curved surfaces. With polygons, we need a lot of faces to create something that looks curved, because each of those polygon faces is flat. With a NURB surface is already curved. It's like taking a piece of paper and bending it. If I right-click on my Nurbs sphere, you can see I have things like isoparms and holes. If I click on the control vertex, you can see that these points that I select are actually hovering just beyond the shape. And if I pull one, you can see how they affect the curve. And so the curves are based off of these points that aren't actually on the line itself, but I can adjust them by doing that. So Nurbs are great for rounded surfaces. They can be really powerful. We won't use them very much this year, but by default, Maya creates Nurbs objects when you use the Revolve. So I'm going to go ahead and delete both of these. And I'm going to go to my 4-view. So I can click over here on my 4-view option, or I can press spacebar and go to my 4-view. When I'm doing a Revolve, when I'm creating an object that is symmetrical so that I can keep repeating it in a circle to create it, I start with drawing a shape. And I want to do that in one of my 2D views. So I'm going to come down here to this front view, and with my mouse here in the front view, I can press spacebar. And now I'm dealing with the front view. Now, this thick line here is very important. This is 0 on the y-axis, this is 0 on the x-axis, and that's what everything is going to be based off of, so I don't want to get too far away from there. Now, there are several different kinds of curves. They're all available here, but it's easier for me to show them if I go to Create Curve Tools. I am going to show you these first three. So the first one is the CV Curve tool, and as I click, you will see I have to click 4 times to create a curve. What I'm doing with the CV Curve tool is I'm actually creating, kind of like with that Nurbs thing, these points here are just directing the line. And as I go around here, you can see that I'm not actually clicking where the line is going to go. I'm creating kind of a framework for that line to be created. And each time I click, the more I click, the more curved an object will be. So I don't use this one ever, but it is one of the ways that you can create a curve in this program. Now, you hit escape to cancel your curve. So if you hit escape, it'll all be gone. You hit enter to OK it. So if I hit enter, I'll OK this curve, and then it becomes an actual thing. And if I want to close this curve, I need to make sure I'm in modeling in my drop-down options, and then under curves I can say open close. And if I click that, it'll close that shape. And now I can make things with that. But I'm going to hit delete, and I'll show you the next one. So I'm going to come here to my curve tools and use EP curve. Now, EP curve, I'm actually clicking where the curve is going to be created. But as I do so, it is curving those shapes. So the further apart I get, I can also, after I click on them, I can use the middle mouse to adjust where they are, and I can even change them again later. So once again, I can hit enter to OK that. Also, with both of those kinds of curves, if I right-click on this and choose Control Vertex, I can actually select these points and adjust them individually. So even after you create a shape, you can change them. And if I use some of these do things a little differently. I mostly do the Control Vertex. But I can adjust these later, and then once again, under Object Mode, if I select this, I can close it like that, and that'll close it. The one that I use, because it's a lot like the, well, it's exactly the way that you create lines in Illustrator, is the Bezier Curve. So if I come here to create Curve Tools, I prefer this one. If I just click, I get straight lines. If I click and I hold down my mouse and I drag out these handles. This handle represents, it pulls out 2. One in the direction that you pulled, that's where the line is going to head next out of that point. This one that came out of the back is where the line is going to enter in. So basically you click and you drag in the direction you want the line to go next. The longer you drag, the more the line is going to try to go that way before it turns. And so if I stop dragging, then I'm back to straight lines again. And a quick way to close this is if I want to make sure this shape is completely closed off, I can hold down Control and Shift and then click on that beginning point, and that'll close it. And then when I hit Enter, I've created the shape. That's the one I'm going to use today because it's a lot like other programs that I teach. So if you want to use one of the other curves, that's fine. Just be aware that sometimes it's going to take some manipulation after you've kind of laid it out to make that work. Now I want to use an example image to be able to trace. So I've included a wine glass in the shared folder, or you can just find an example of a kind of a 2D view of a wine glass online. And the way that I bring that in is I'm still in my front view. That's going to help me out a lot later. If you're accidentally in the top view, that's going to change if you're using Y or X coordinates. So make sure you're in the front view. Oops, and I just changed that. So I'm going to go back to my front view here. And then in the second menu, this is my viewport menu. Under View, I can bring in an image by choosing Image Plane and Import Image, which I will then navigate and find that image. And I have put a JPEG called Wine Glass on my desktop, so I'm going to double click on that. Now I can move this around. I want it to stay in the center, so if I'm going to make any change to it, I really only want to increase the size. I hit R for my scale tool, and now I'm using the center scale to make it a little bit bigger. And also, if you don't have your attribute editor, press Control A. I can turn the color gain down so that it's a little darker so that I can see my line. So once I've got that set up and kind of the size that I want, I can resize it later, I can start creating my curve. Now, I am only going to be drawing 1/4 of the cup. I'm going to draw from this line. This line is going to be my axis. That's what I'm going to revolve around. So I don't want to go past this vertical Y0 line, and I'm only going to be drawing this side of the cup. So I'll come here to Create, Curve Tools, and like I said, I prefer the Bezier Curve. I can see that the bottom of the bowl of the cup is right here, so I'm going to click there, and then I'll move down here, and to keep it straight line, I'm going to click here as well. And if I'm feeling like I can't quite hit it there, I can turn on this magnet with the grid. This is a snap to grid. This will force the line to be on a straight line throughout, but that can cause some issues as well. So you just have to be really careful to make sure that it's pretty close. And now I can start making the curves. Now, some of you will have some experience with the Bezier curve, and some of you may not. You might be using one of the other curve options instead, and that's perfectly fine, as long as you get some experience making something that curves in here. Now I'm doing the outside of the glass. I'm going to curve it all the way up here to the top. I'm holding down Alt in the middle mouse wheel to slide along my image here. Now when I get to the top, I want it to be hollow, at least for this part. So I need to make sure that I come in around on this side as well. So this is, if I was cutting that cup in half and in half again, if I make a mistake I can Control Z, this is maybe what that cup would look like. And once again, when I get back to the beginning, I can hold down Control Shift and this button to close it, and then Enter to OK. So now I'll click on it so it's selected. I have an edge that is going to be built along. That's the y-axis, y0 here. I have this cup. It's going to be hollow because when it revolves, all of this empty space is also going to revolve around here to this, and this part of the cup is going to revolve around there as well. So let's try it out. I'm going to make sure I'm in object mode and select the entire line that I've created, and now I can come here to Surfaces and choose Revolve. And that creates a Nurbs. By default, it's Nurbs. If you'd rather have a Polygon cup, because you can't do things like smoothing and stuff, the standard stuff we've been doing, to a Nurbs cup. When you revolve, if you choose the options instead, you can change it to polygons here. But for what I'm trying to do today, this will work out perfectly. Now, if your cup comes in and it's not gray, but it's black instead, what's happened is it revolved basically inside out, and you're looking at the back of the back of the Nurbs. And Maya doesn't by default render the backs of Nurbs. So what you need to do is make sure that the cup is selected, come here to surfaces, and it might be off the edge of my page, but the very bottom one is called reverse direction. And if you click that, that should reverse which way the Nurbs are facing, and you should end up with a gray cup that you can render and see. And that's what it looks like in a software render without any lighting or any materials placed on it. So I'm going to go ahead and add some things to it. Before I do anything else though, it is still actually attached to that, that curve that I created. So if I click on this curve, I just want to make sure that before I do anything to it, I click on this cup and I come here to edit, delete by type history, which should disconnect any associations it's had with the way it's been made. And now I can delete that line. I can click on the image and delete it, and now I can work with my cup. So what I'm going to do to this cup, I'm going to go back to Polygons and create a ground plane that I'll make big so I can see some shadows and such on it. Maybe I'll make the cup a little bit smaller too. And then in my hyper shader, sorry, my screen is very small here. I'm going to go to my mental ray materials and choose the Maya Material X, which is the one that we often use for everything. I'm going to rename this one glass, and as the preset, I'm going to go ahead and use let's do the solid glass and see what happens there. Then I can middle click and drag that onto the material. Now I'm getting it as red in here because I'm not actually in my mental ray render, so I'm going to have to come to my render settings, make sure that it's set to mental ray, and then while I'm here I'm going to go ahead and add a physical sun and sky. And when I render this, I should have a pretty nice wine glass with all sorts of cool shadows and refractions and reflections going on with it. And a lot of that is just that MIA Material X render using one of the glass ones placed on that glass. So as the second part of your assignment is I would like you to try to revolve something else. So you could create anything that is symmetrical, rounded, bowling ball, or bowling pin, a baseball bat. You could do a vase, flower pots. Just try to use this process again. And I would move the wine glass out of the way. I would go back to your front view, maybe move your wine glass off of this Y0, and go ahead and maybe even find an image to use as your basis again, and go back to view, image plane, and import that image. Trace the half of the image that you see and try to revolve that again, and that will be the second part of your assignment.